I got Sid here, and Sid, I got a really good question for you. I want to hear your thought process on this. It's not a traditional thing that gets talked about a lot, especially from people that aren't owner operators. So we here at Headway, we buy properties, we bring on investors, and we operate our own deals. We're owner operators. We're used to getting our hands dirty. We also have a company, right? We've got supervisors, maintenance, leasing, HR, finance, all the departments you really need to make a company go. So one thing that we have been talking a lot about, because it's really, really important to us in our long-term success, is company culture, right? Not something you hear a lot about, but tell us a little bit about how you think company culture impacts the performance of our multifamily assets, both for our residents and of course for our investors as well.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, even if you're running any business, whether it's apartment complex or um, retail store, or even just a customer base service oriented business, at the end of the day, somebody have to do that job, and it purely depends on how well your team going to execute that. I mean, the reality of things are that my job or your job, Ryan, is to make sure to have RPRS correctly, which means right people, right place at the right time. And if we don't have that, no matter how awesome or how amazing our deal is, it's not going to execute. I'm not going to produce this. And so clearly, the short answer is absolutely. It's very important. So much so that you and I we've spent any time when we're not looking at answering our questions to investors or doing distributions or things of that nature. We spend time recruiting and keeping and focusing on employee culture. Somebody have to lease those units. Somebody have to fix the AC. Somebody have to fix toilets. Somebody have to fix and take care of the residents. So the way I look at it, I mean, there are really three customers that we cater to. Number one is obviously our investors who are trusting us with their hard-earned money. Number two is our residents who are paying their bills, their rents, and we provide the customer service that deserved by these residents. But the third, which is arguably the most important customer, I say, is our employees. If you don't think of our employees as our customer, we won't be able to think what really matters to them, right? And go deep beyond how much you pay them or what commission they can make and how much money they can make. Obviously, it's super important, but uh, in my experience, that money part dilutes pretty fast. So the things that we do at Headway in our property management wing is it's called Kismet Property Management. Is 80% of our time goes into figuring out the right people, right place. How do we make sure that our A players are staying with us for long term? How do we make sure that our non A players are growing to a point where they can become A players? So, in short, the work order somebody have to fix, the customer service that we have to provide to our residents, the collections that we have to do, paying invoices on time, making sure that our lenders, our city, our insurance, they're all in compliance. It's a lot of work, and people who are owner operators, that may sound whatever I'm saying, that may sound very trivial to them because they do it on day in day out basis, and really they don't think it that way that they should be coming on a camera and talking about it because that's a lot of hard work and a lot 99% time when you do all of that. By the end of the week, you're burnt so much that you don't have time to go record those things. So I'm just glad that you asked this question where we can not only tell us what we do in our business, but also appreciate all those people out there who are managing and operating their own properties, their own businesses. It's some hard work. I mean, keeping there's a terrible saying, business would be so easy if it's not with people, right? Your 80% of the job is to make sure you're at least 90, 95% of your people in your team are A players and you constantly either growing them out or growing them up, right? There's just no way uh, to have a right people in a wrong seat.
Absolutely. So you're talking about aligning property goals with employee incentives. We're talking about culture and how culture can impact multifamily performance, especially for our investors and of course for our residents and the experience that they have. So we have to make sure that the incentives that we put in place, the goals that we set in place for our staff align with the ultimate objectives, whether it's occupancy, stabilizing renovations, so we can achieve the goals that we're trying to accomplish and have forecasted for our multifamily investors. Give us some examples of some things that we do here at Headway Kismet on the property management side to really spice up the culture, to make our saying is work hard, have fun, or work hard, play hard, right? Want to make sure we're having a good time while we're working because you alluded to this. The business is really hard. It's a thankless business being in the multifamily space. Very few people come up to you and say thank you for the hard work that you do. They usually have an issue or they need help with something. So you're constantly solving issues all day. What are some things that we do on the culture side to get people to one, want to come work for us, leaving their place that they may be happy at or place that they're leaving, and two, wanting to stay working for us if we're not turning over employees over a short period of time.
Yeah. I think, look, see, our company slogan is it's all about the people. Almost every single time when I'm hiring the right candidate, they go ask and they always ask me, what do you mean by all about people? And that's what this all boils down to, what you're pointing out, right? We've got these investors that we have to produce returns for, but somebody have to do the work, which is this set of employees. And frankly, the way I look at it, I want to ask myself why somebody would come and work for us, work for me, work for you, right? That's a bigger question. I mean, they can find job anywhere, right? There's no shortage of job for the right candidate, right? And there's no shortage of employees for the right company, right? So that matching can happen at the time of recruiting and hiring, but that's just 10% of the work. Like what happens throughout the journey of that employee who we want to become a team member who's taking the ownership, doing the teamwork, taking the feedback as not as a criticism, but as a way to grow themselves. So the way we have put structure in place that we basically incentivize on pretty much everything, right? You talk about number of workers that you're fixing, right? We call it internally number of memories you're making, right? So we have a big chart within our company that we basically in process of implementing that each and every one of our team member will be monitored and will be incentivized based on the number of memories that they're creating for their residents. Right, fixing a toilet when you really need it. Let's say you're a resident and you have that's your daughter's graduation. For whatever reason, the toilet is not working. That that good memory that you're trying to create as a resident is not so good anymore, right? When it's not getting fixed in time. So we incentivize people on work orders that they fix within 24 hours. We incentivize people on the renewals or the retention, the residents who are living on a property. The best, the way apartment complex as far as multifamily is concerned, multifamily makes money when somebody renews, and that's a big part, right? So we incentivize our employees, our team members, to renew as many people as they can, right? And that's incentive. The way we incentivize it, not only from the monetary value, but also from appreciation value, right? Meaning a good team member renews, number of residents more than expected. Well, guess what? Not only that they're incentivized with money, but also a recognition within the company. So the three rules that we really run on is that we inspect what we expect. We believe in discipline, not in motivation. And then we incentivize and glorify as much as we can our team. So if my, you know, 80% of my time when I'm spending on this right people, right place is on these three things, right? You may hire somebody who's a superstar doing everything, but if they're not getting, if they're not appreciated, even though they're making a ton of money, right? The chances are they're not going to stay too long.
So aligning goals with our teams, making sure everybody's on the same page, aligning incentives with those goals is really important. What are some things that we do for long-term employees that have been with us for several years that you would consider to be different than maybe your traditional property management company?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've got incentives um, on in a tier level, right? So somebody who just joined, those incentives are pretty standard as industry standard. I mean, you get your base salary, your commissions, 401, your healthcare, and things of nature, sick dailies and pay times off. Those are pretty standard um, benefits that we believe that not everybody else is doing, but that's pretty prevalent. But the real incentive, in my view, happens when our team members are really growing within the company by performing their KPIs and their scorecard. Right. Oh, by the way, I just want to add one thing is each of our employees in our company have a KPI and a scorecard. What scorecard basically means on weekly basis. They're being accountable on those scorecards as a manager. What are the things that you're supposed to do on a weekly basis, and then we keep them accountable not by just from our supervisors making sure that they're doing what they're doing, but also we have a corporate auditor who goes on properties and audit those expectations. So going back, if somebody passing all those um, hurdles, I don't want to say hurdles is a terrible word, but really proving and aligning their performance with our values, that means he or she is a player, and we got to do something different, something better for our A players. Some of our benefits are very very confidential, but I can give you some ideas in terms of, say, somebody's working for us and they're completed their 5 years. Now that person will become a part owner in a company, right? So they'll come onto a profit sharing mechanism. For that, that's over and above their 401. They can invest with us within those properties, and they get returns, just like we get returns on our properties. This is a little bit different. It's entirely different than how LPs or our partners are investing. This is a company fund that we created for them, where they can invest with us, or even in some cases don't even invest with them. They basically eligible for profit share. Then if somebody is at the 10 years mark, those incentives are so flexible that we basically do everything and anything if it's an A player and it's the right person to keep them with us. That can include the scholarships or big loans from the company, or even in some cases, um, we have an incentive. Let me just throw it out here. But we have an incentive that we basically uh, can go and help the team member, the employee who is completion to 10 years, buy their first house, right? Or buy their even investment property. So those are just some of the few that I believe that our competition is absolutely not doing it. We strongly believe that these team members are way over and above just a number. And throughout that process, if somebody's completing the first year and second year of their employment, that's coming to third year, the reality is that we want to know them more than the resume from get go, and then really what's happening throughout their life, or throughout their career growth. So those are the. I mean, it's hard to like we. It's hard to explain that in a recording or answer that way. But you and I both know we have a very structured plan for each employee, that what happens at each level as they progress in their career.
So last week, I was talking to one of our fund partners that helps us on some of our multifamily investment opportunities, and they asked me about communication, and it brought this up in my mind again of how important it is to make sure not only that you're communicating with your investors, obviously people that invest their time in our relationship, they write us a check for their from their bank account for their hard-earned money, or they invest using their self-directed IRA. We want to make sure we're communicating really well with them, but just as importantly is we have several partners in our portfolio, and we want to make sure we're communicating with them as well. So some of our capital partners, whether they're family office, private equity, or if they're a fund manager or a co-GP, want to make sure we're providing them with timely updates and communication, because if they're not able to know what's going on with the property, communicate with their investors, well, their investors might have a bad experience, and that goes back on them. Go back and point the finger at us and say, hey, those guys aren't communicating. Of course, they could do that. The reality is their investors are going to look to them, because their job is to find best in class investment opportunities, best in class sponsors, best in class deals. And if they're partnering with a sponsor and not having good communication, well, that's a recipe for disaster. So I was talking to somebody last week, and they had mentioned that they invested with somebody and they weren't getting timely updates. They couldn't get a hold of the sponsor, and I could just imagine how scary it is. So, Sid, you're an investor. You're a passive investor as well. But tell me a little bit about how you view communication, and what we do to try to make sure we're communicating not only with our LPs but also with our fund partners, our capital partners as well on our deals.
Yeah, look, I'll keep it real. You know, I hardly look at those updates only because I have so many other investments passively with other people. And the time that I start paying attention is when I'm not getting my distributions, right? Or when I'm not getting the returns that I was expected. And that's where this whole communication really plays a role. No, I'm not discounting the fact that we should be, and you guys are doing a great job. I mean, we have an internal process of responding to our investors within 24 hours, right? And we have a dedicated person who's keeping a track of it. And that grew right? Over the years. I mean, initially, uh, when we started out our investment syndication programs, we were also learning, right, what is the right way to communicate, how frequent should we be communicating. A lot of it is, setting the expectation correctly the early on. But you guys are doing a great job in terms of keeping them monthly basis, keeping them updated, and they may or may not be reading it, and that's okay. Right? Because not everybody, I mean, our investors are maybe on their vacations, maybe on some of our GPs are on their retirement phase. They don't want to read very long email. And yes, they might appreciate it. But what's critical is that it becomes really, really, really important when something goes wrong. Right. Our philosophy within our company is pretty straightforward. If there's a bad news, I need to know now. And it same goes with our investors. So when I'm as a passive investor, when I'm looking at either my distribution are going down or whatever the reason is, or their distribution was supposed to come monthly, now it's coming quarterly, or whatever the pause is, I want to hear this news early on, right? And if I can see if there's a plan to how to combat it, if I can read, if I can get communicated by my sponsor that yes, this is a tough quarter or a tough year of XYZ reasons, and they can quantify it and then tell me a plan. That's what I'm looking for. But again, if this communication has not been happening and then I'm getting a bad news of some kind right at the midnight, so to speak, then it's not a big experience. Not every investment will perform the way you expected they will perform. A lot of investments will go outperform your expectation, but the reality is that communication is controllable. We control the communication, and internally we have people who are come and go, and somebody is responsible to do something, didn't do it. The reality is that we just have to control that internal process to communicate out with our investors so fast, a timely manner, so that when we have a bad news, that bad news is not surprising them. I'm not saying that we should have a bad news. I'm saying is that that's the reality of doing business.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the key word is systems and processes when it comes to communication and then also aligning expectations, right? If you're a multifamily sponsor or syndicator and you plan on having capital partners, your investors need to know, are they getting monthly emails? Are they getting quarterly emails? Are they getting video updates? Is it text updates? And then really it comes down to having a team behind you to make sure you're delivering those updates on a timely basis because once you start having multiple properties, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 properties, communication is arguably a full-time job or close to it. Not only speaking to investors on the phone, webinar updates, but also writing those emails, making sure you understand what's going on as whoever is the person in charge of that. And that's where
It's a
there's
lot
a
of
little bit
work.
of an
Yeah.
hard work involved, and the systems and processes are so key to making sure your investors have a good experience. The other thing I think that's important to highlight that you mentioned, Sid, is you're right. It's not always going to be great news, right? The key is consistent communication, and investors just want to be in the loop. They want to know what's going on, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. Hopefully, no ugly, but these are long term investments. They're typically 3 to 5 years, and it's not going to all be, rosy. It's not going to all be amazing, nothing but up, right? There's going to be some bumps in the road. There could be electrical issues, plumbing issues, fires, hurricanes. You could have occupancy drop when you first take over, which is usually a part of the plan anyway. And investors just want to know what's going on, and they really want to know. They really want to know, and especially your capital partners, that you have both hands on the wheel, right? If you're the one driving the bus, if you're the lead sponsor, what they don't want is you're driving with one hand on the wheel and like texting at the same time.
Yeah.
Just to use that analogy, you're not paying attention,
Absolutely.
right? So you want to have both hands on the wheel, and that's where good communication, having a system, having a team in place as well, not just having like one person. Some operators are just a one man show. Well, it's really challenging to communicate when you're in that system. Overall, I think communication can make or break an investment, and I've had so many investors tell me that they won't invest with a sponsor, even though they maybe made money because the communication was very poor. And I've had the other way around too, where maybe they invested in a deal and it underperformed. Ideally, of course, didn't lose their investment, but it underperformed. Maybe they were promising a 20% return and they got a 17 or 16 or 15. Not what they expected, but the communication was strong. The operator did everything they could to try to make sure that deal performed. They still made a little bit of money, and they will go back and invest again because they felt like they were a part of the team because the communication was so solid. So I think communication is vital to the success of any partnership, whether you're a passive investor or a capital partner in any of these deals.
Brian, talk about a little bit more. I know you and Danny, you guys have a pretty well-oiled system now in place. recently we have done a lot of improvements. Took a lot of work. Talk about internally, what process you guys are following, and how are you making sure that these updates are going out on time and you're keeping people accountable of collecting data and all that.
Yeah, our goal for all of our LPs and then all of our sponsors that partner with us, our capital partners, is to have an update out for all of our properties by the end of the month. So, and we have the same goal. If we have distributions that are being paid quarterly, we want to make sure that distributions go out on time. Right, that's always a goal. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. Mistakes will get made, or delays may happen in communication. But we have a tendency to try to make sure we're over communicating versus under communicating, and we've built a system for that. So, on the back end, there's a lot that has to happen. As an investor or as a co-sponsor, you just get an email in your inbox, and it's like magic. Here's the update, right? You're not
Yeah.
really thinking about all the hard work that went into that update, right? So, first of all, it all starts with our CFO, right? So, Umar, he has to go through
Well,
the financials.
let's step back a little bit. It starts from the manager who's actually knew that they have to start collecting data every month what they're
Correct.
reporting.
Right. So the manager has to input invoices, POs, everything has to get approved. They have to make sure their closeouts done on time. I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes sort of hard work that happens in order to be able to deliver financials on time to Umar so he can go through with our bookkeeper, make sure all the GL codes are correct, make sure everything was logged correctly, credits, debits, invoices, what was missed, what was not missed. And then you have a set of financials that are ready to present to our investors, ready to present to our lenders. And then there's a story or a narrative that needs to be drawn from those financials. And that's where me and my assistant sort of step in and we get on monthly calls. Well, first of all, we're on calls weekly, of course, about each one of the assets, but we get on a monthly recap call. We go down each one of our assets and say, okay, let's start at the top. We're going to work our way down. Let's go through the financials here. I already reviewed them because they get sent to me before that call. Here are all the questions I have that I see that do the financials, right? And we'll sit there and we'll have a back and forth about, hey, expenses were high here because of this, or man, I noticed we cut costs drastically here. What happened? Oh, we did a water conservation program. Oh, awesome. Let's talk a little bit about that, right? So, want to make sure that a narrative is able to be drawn from each one of these financials, and that takes time and that takes a lot of hard work. And then our team has to go in and craft the narrative and make sure that it's put together in a present in a way that's easy to digest in an email, short, to the point, sweet, and then I have to go in and kind of refine it, clean it up, and then they all get sent out, right? And this happens across many, 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 many properties, and it takes hours and hours and hours of time in order to get these investment updates out before the end of the month. So there's a lot of work. There's a system. There's many people involved, from the property manager to our CFO, you, Sid, me, my assistant. There's a lot of people involved to make sure we get one update out for a property. So it's definitely a lot of work, and it makes you think. Anytime you do get good communication from a sponsor, it's a good sign, especially if they have a big company and they have many investments, that they just have their act together.
Yeah. Um, one thing that I want to add, back in days when I started, I mean, I have few investors who didn't have computer or didn't have email access. So they expected the updates on the phone. And that made me realize that, I mean, because I was running under the assumption that who would not have an email? You know what I'm saying? It's not always true. What I'm trying to point out is that it's not a crime to not have an email. What I'm trying to say is that it's important for us to set the expectation and alignment early on, that how we want to communicate. What is our source of communication? Is it a phone update, right? I mean, and I did that phone update with that investor, to be honest. Every quarter I get on call with him and I explain him this is what's been happening. I mean, they're old school and they didn't want to be bothered with that, and they've been most of the time in traveling, so they didn't want to be relying on the emails and all of that. Back in days, I remember people would get their updates in mail as a printout. It still happens in some of the oil and gas projects that I'm involved in, and they just send the quarterly updates on the paper. Long story short, and then I want to add another thing. One of our recent investors who came into our property, and I asked him, he was investing with some other group, and he was pretty satisfied. I was asking him, okay, what is it that you really like? And he's like, oh, this is very communicative. And it's like, okay, explain me what the communication means. And to him, the communication meant was that he was getting WhatsApp phone text updates every time when something happened on the property. Now, is it the best use of time or best use of updates? We don't do it this way only because we think um, it's just way too much um, information that our investor may or may not need, right? So once a month. So the point I'm trying to make here is it's super important for us to clarify how the commission is going to happen. What will be the frequency? Is it a quarterly update or a monthly update? Is it an email update or is it a phone text update? Hopefully, nobody's expecting a phone call. That'll be big trouble for us to manage. Knowing, for us to know who is our investor, who is our audience, how are they getting updated on our investments is super critical. A lot of times, email goes through the crack. I mean, some in- some investor may respond to me, and I might uh, miss that email, and and then we have to go back on the call with them. Say, hey, explain that, hey, not this email. Send an email to this, inquiry on this email. That way we can streamline the communication. So there's a lot of work for sure that you guys are doing. And once in a while, here and there always communication falls through the crack. I was just on call with one of the investors over Sunday over the phone, and they just wanted to, talk it through in terms of what I was trying to help them in one of the deals that they're part of. But long story short, I think it takes a lot of work. It definitely takes a system and process in place, and then setting expectations upfront that how the communication will happen, and following through it. Right. Otherwise, nobody will trust us.
Absolutely. And trust is the most important part when it comes to communication. There's a saying in capital raising or in real estate that you want your investors and your partners to know you, to like you, and to trust you. And if they've gotten to the point where they've actually written you a check or they've decided to partner with you on a deal, they clearly know you, they clearly like you, and they're trusting you to execute on the business plan. So that's still, kind of TBD. But one of the ways you can maintain trust or build trust, I should say, is just communicating really well, right? It sounds really simple, but it's often overlooked and hard to execute. And again, I can't count on two hands how many times I've spoken to somebody that said they had poor communication from one of their partnerships. So that trust factor, maintaining good communication, is so crucial to long-term success, and just really building rapport and building tenure with your investors so they want to invest with you again.
Absolutely.